Welcome to Modern Homestead, Alaska. I am Jessica, and today we are making 5 fantastic pumpkin recipes, and I cannot wait to share these with you. When it is fall and pumpkin season and the stores finally have these little sugar pumpkins in stock, I get them and I decorate the kitchen with them. And then when it comes time to actually cook these little babies, I just pull them off of the shelf and we are going to get baking them. So the first thing we have to do is, or the first thing we're going to do is learn to turn this little sugar pumpkin into something that we can eat. It doesn't have to just be pie, although we're gonna make pie today. It can be turned into breads and pastas and any number of things. And I wanna show you how you turn this into the same usable pumpkin that we're all used to seeing in the cans in the store. It's super easy. You take the top off, super sharp knife. Even with a sharp knife, it is gonna be a little struggle. And then on a flat side, you just cut her in half. I used to, when I first started doing this, take all the time to clean everything out of the center. I have since learned that is pointless. I can scrape that out with a spoon when everything is said and done, or you can kind of clean it all out now. I am gonna take all of it out, and when I do, I'm just gonna feed it to our chickens because pumpkin is really, really good for the chickens. So they're gonna get a treat and we are gonna get some pumpkin. So we're gonna see how many we can get. I can fit 2 baking sheets in my oven. Let me preheat that. 350 degrees. So you just cut through all the pumpkins and then you lay them on the baking sheet, cut side down. We're gonna steam them. Okay, then you're gonna get 3. Another pumpkin. And don't throw anything away. Even the tops are gonna go to the chickens. 3 on that tray. Let me see how many more I have. 1, 2. I see a third one. 3. So I do have 6. All right, so I'm gonna put a little water in the bottom of the baking dish, just enough. Okay, so about 1 of these mason jars apiece. And so what I'm gonna do is put these in the oven and I'm just gonna let them go and steam. The water will steam out and get absorbed. And when I can touch the pumpkin and it collapses, that's when we know that it's done. So in they go. The light in my oven is out, and so the lighting might not be fantastic. So I wanna show you, I can literally smell the pumpkin. And so I'll pull them out. Look at how much darker they're getting. And what we're looking for is right here, because I poked another one and it was not soft. So you see how that one is still, it dents a little, but it's pretty firm. These are super firm. What we want is way beyond this. So I'm filming, so I'm gonna talk to a camera. All right, so let me show you. See this one right here? You see how it starts to collapse and fall in? So now all we're gonna do is the center of the pumpkin, the seeds and whatnot, those go in a bowl, and then all the rest of the flesh here, we scrape it out, and I put it in a strainer because it is so full of liquid that we do not want our pies and such to be full of. So I have let it cool down enough where I can handle it. Yeah. Right, so this is the last one, and it just cleans up so easy. And I'm gonna cover this with saran wrap, and I'm gonna let the pumpkin drain and cool overnight. All right, it's time to actually get baking. So the first thing we're gonna do is take this pumpkin that has sat. You do not have to put it in the colander overnight. You don't have to do what I did. That's just the time frame that I had. And it's easier for me to just let it sit, get some of the moisture out, and start the process the next day. So pumpkin is really, really stringy when you cook it this way. And so we need to run it either through a food mill, or I'm gonna run it through the Ninja, but you have to, some people just stick like the beaters in there and beat it. Whatever it is, we're just going to get it broke down so that it's more of the consistency to what you expect canned pumpkin. Got a couple of seeds in there. All right, second batch down, and I'm just moving it to a separate bowl. And I am going to make one recipe with canned pumpkin because I know that that is something that most people are used to, or maybe you have that already in your pantry and you didn't go and buy fresh pumpkins, and that's totally cool. All of these recipes that we're doing today can be made with fresh pumpkin or canned pumpkin. Just follow the ingredient amounts. So they stay the same, but there we go. Fresh pumpkin to the side. All right, the first recipe we're getting started with is the Copycat Starbucks pumpkin bread. I am not kidding you. If you've ever gone to Starbucks and gotten their pumpkin bread during the holidays, it really, really is very, very good. But that bread is made off-site. There's no telling if there's preservatives or whatever, and I'm not accusing Starbucks or saying that there is. The likelihood of something being shipped that far, it's frozen, all of the different things. I found this Copycat recipe several years ago on Pinterest. There will be a link in the description box, and it makes 2 loaves, but the first thing we're gonna do is preheat the oven to 350 degrees. So anyway, it's all super simple. We're going to take a bowl, we're gonna mix this by hand. We'll get the flour out of the way for a second, and let me tell you exactly what's in here. So 2 cups of white sugar. So I like this brand. It's just the organic white sugar from Costco, and I buy it in the big bags. We fill 5-gallon buckets of it and keep it on hand, and then we go through it throughout the baking season. If you're wondering what I'm doing with all these recipes this week, we are having a big family dinner at Cody's tomorrow night, and so everything is gonna be taken over there. The next thing I'm digging out is the brown sugar. We're going to do 1 cup of brown sugar. Mine got a little bit dried out. This is not a great container, but you know what I did? I stuck a piece of white bread in there this morning, and it's already loosened it up to where I can use it. You can always make it yourself from scratch. A little tickle on my nose I'm trying not to touch. So I will just leave that piece of white bread in here for the next several days, and it will loosen up this brown sugar, and it'll go right back to fine. So 2 cups white sugar, 1 cup brown sugar. We are going to use a measuring cup here and put most of our liquid ingredients. So it is 1 cup, it calls for vegetable oil. I have avocado oil. You use your own discretion on that, but it should be a very neutral flavored oil. Unless you're used to baking with something like olive oil and your family is used to the richness of that flavor, use something mild. For farm fresh eggs, it doesn't say farm fresh. I literally had to wash mine this morning because my chickens did not lay them in the box. They laid them right under where they roost, so they were disgusting. So I got those all washed up. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're gonna get that in here. Is going to be 1 can. So this is the one where we're gonna use the can. 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree. I wanna read, this one is organic pumpkin. A lot of the times your pumpkin that you get in a can is not actually pumpkin. It's some sort of like squash or something like that. So 1 15-ounce can of the pumpkin goes in. 2/3 of a cup of water going in. All right, the rest are going to be the dry spices. So we're gonna give this a little whisk and set it aside. Moving on to the dry ingredients, we want to give these a little whisk together as well before we add them to the wet, because we do not want to find chunks of something like baking soda throughout the bread. So we're just gonna scoop 3.5 cups of flour. To that, we're gonna add 2 teaspoons of baking soda. To this, 1.5 teaspoons of salt. 1.5. The recipe is very heavy in ground clove, and if you don't like that, cut it in half or just substitute for cinnamon or something else. So it does call for 2 teaspoons of ground clove, which is a lot of ground clove. But the size of the recipe, it does okay, really it does. Pumpkin pie spice, it's already all those beautiful things mixed together. I get this from Azure as well as the clove and the rest. So 1 teaspoon of that. About 1/2 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. So we're gonna grab the one that's already been ground. We're gonna grind. There's some fresh ground nutmeg in here. Pull the dry ingredients together. The little whisk. All right, to our wet ingredients, we are going to add the dry, maybe in thirds or halves. And give that a whisk. Rest of the dry. This is our rendered lard. It will do really, really well. So I'm just gonna use a paper towel and grease the pans. Super simple. You could use butter, cooking spray, whatever it is that you have. All right, we're gonna divide it between the 2 loaf pans. There's one. Because my loaf pans are not the same size, that's why I measure it out. Okay, like that. I have these green pumpkin seeds, and so a couple of tablespoons is what it calls for. So we just sprinkle some over the top, and then these are going to go into that 350-degree oven for about an hour. Then we'll check on them, and after that they will cool. In the meantime, while these are baking for an hour, we are going to start our second recipe, and that is a roll that has to rise. So it's the perfect time to get that going while these bake off and we're not competing for oven space. These will be out in an hour. All right, so this is a little bit different than how I normally do yeast. I usually have whatever it is, the water, the milk. You add the yeast to it, and then you let it bloom. But this recipe really wants us to combine 3 cups of flour, And you don't have to be all that particular because you're going to add flour in 1/2 cup increments after a few minutes in order to get a certain consistency. So right about 3 cups of flour, as well as 4.5 teaspoons of rapid yeast. I buy the big containers of it at Costco, and I just put it in the mason jar after I open it, and I leave it in the freezer, and it works great. So just pull straight from the freezer. So 4.5 teaspoons. Sometimes I leave a little of it if I'm gonna be doing a ton of baking, and I'll just leave it at room temperature because sometimes I think that works a little bit better. It says to do that. 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar, as well as 1 teaspoon of salt. My regular, like, quick yeast bread recipe, it does have me just throw the yeast and everything into the bowl, mix it together, no big deal. 1 teaspoon, it's not gonna be super sweet bread, but it is a little bit sweet. 1 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. Again, that's the pre-blended spice. And then, let's see, 5 tablespoons of soft butter. But let me whisk this, get that together before I add some of these wet ingredients. And then we're gonna put the dough hook attachment on the mixer and mix it together. So it wants 1 egg. There we go. Because we're using a dough hook, I am gonna give the egg just a little whisk. Okay, 1 egg. 1, okay, so the 5 tablespoons of soft butter. 1 flour, yeast, brown sugar, salt, milk, 1 cup of pie or pumpkin. Do not, if you're using canned pumpkin, you don't want to make your own pumpkin from scratch, do not use pumpkin pie filling. There is a big difference in the baking section. So 1 cup of pumpkin. So this is our fresh pumpkin. And then the 1 cup of warm milk. So I used an instant read thermometer. It got up to about 115, and we're down between 100 and 110 degrees now. So warm milk. Let's add the dough hook to the mixer. Okay, so here is what we're looking like. I can feel the warm milk on the sides of the bowl. It wants me to put this in here with the dough hook, put it on low, bring it together, scrape down the sides, and then after this is combined, it wants me to go on medium with the dough hook for about 2 minutes before we start adding the rest of the flour. So. We've let her go for about 2 minutes. I'm gonna slide this guard on. It doesn't completely protect everything. I wish it did kind of go around the back. However, the least amount of flour blowing all over my kitchen, the better. And so now we're going to add 1/2 cup of flour at a time. What we're looking for is it to form a dough ball that's pulled away from the sides. It can be a little bit tacky, it said. However, we are looking like for a bread dough. So here's the first 1/2 cup. And we're going to go somewhere between 4.5 to 5.5 cups of flour total. So there's already 3 in there. Now there's 3.5. It starts absorbing. Let me show you what it does. So it starts absorbing the flour, starting to pull away. And then right about here, adding another 1/2 cup. And now we actually have a bread dough. Okay, so that's what you're actually looking for. Right there. Done. From here, we're gonna pull the, still gonna be a little bit tacky. We're gonna pull the dough hook. All right. We're gonna let this rise for about 45 minutes until it's doubled in size. We want to grease a bowl. I can grab it, handle it. Oh, it's soft. That's luxurious. Oh, that's beautiful. It smells just the hint, just a hint. Okay, put it in, flip it over. And we're gonna look for it to double in size. I'm just gonna cover it with this damp towel we've been using around. I'm gonna get both of the breads finished in my physical day. Obviously, I'm gonna get all of the recipes finished in this video. I'm just trying not to overwhelm my personal kitchen with a bunch of food that we're just not quite ready for. And so, what I'm gonna do is put the pumpkin up for tonight, or the rest of the day, because Aaron and I have some other stuff we're doing today. And I am, however, in just a second, going to make the pie shells, or at least make some pie crust, get that ready. And then we'll bake off the second bread loaves and get going with all of that. And then first thing tomorrow morning, we will make the pies and the 2 savory dishes that are coming up in this video, because we'll be taking all of it to dinner with us. So I'm just gonna put this in the fridge for tonight, and then we're gonna jump over and make some pie crust. Making homemade pie crust is so super simple. I have this big 16-ounce block of butter. And so because the holidays are upon us and coming up, and I have a commitment to make several pies, instead of just making the 2 crusts that I need, I'm actually going to make 4 of them today, and then pop 2 in the freezer, and then 2 for the pies we'll be making tomorrow. So for each pie though, I need half of this. So I need 8 ounces of cold butter, and then we're going to just cube it up. So I'm gonna cut this into cubes. I like to just use the food processor to make the beginning stages of the pie crust, and then I bring it together by hand. Pie crust is one of those things you do not want to overmix. So I'm gonna get 3 cups of flour in the mixer. So 3 cups of flour. 1, if it's a sweet pie, I add sugar. If it's not a sweet pie, I don't. So 1/3 of a cup of sugar, because these are all gonna be sweet pies. And then about a teaspoon of salt. You really do need the salt. And all butter. I used to experiment with the pie shells and do, I would add, try Crisco and lard and sometimes all these different things. And truth be told, I just like an all butter pie crust. So cubing this up, throwing it in there, and we'll get it on the mixer. All right, so pop the mixer together, and it's all dependent on how dry everything is, believe it or not. So we'll let it kind of chop the butter into it for a second. Okay. Okay, perfect. And then using a tablespoon, it could be 3, it could be 5. I'm just gonna look for it to start to come together, and then that is it. So we'll say go. Did you hear it change? Done. see that? Still crumbly. So jump right back over to here. We have a well-used pastry mat. Pour out the dough. The dough is like starting to come together, but it's not all the way together. A little bit crumbly. And then we're gonna smoosh it together as opposed to kind of kneading it. Using the pastry mat, I'm just gonna pick it up and push the sides in. And that is it. Now that it's come together, half it. Here we go. All right, straight into the saran wrap. What do you even have? All right, wrap it. Okay. And then smush it out. And these can go straight into the fridge for just a few days, or they can go into the freezer. You just fully defrost them while the dough, while you're making your pie crust, all that. Roll them out, and voila, you have some homemade pie crust. So these two I'm just gonna pop in the freezer, and then we're gonna make 2 for tomorrow. Same song and date. We have about 2 minutes left on the bread, so I'm gonna take a peek. Oh, no, centers are still a little bit jiggly. Those are coming out so beautiful. All right. We're gonna start turning the pumpkin rolls into rolls. I have a really well-loved baking dish, so I wadded up some parchment paper. So here's our double raised bread. So we want 24. So let's just start dividing it up. 2, 4. So then each one of these into 6. So let's go half, and then in thirds. Perfect. So roll each ball into each dough into a little ball, pinching the underside. These are gonna rise again for another 45 minutes, so. I wanna switch it out. I'm happier with that. So another way you can do it, just roll it around with your fingers like that till the ball comes together. All right, we're gonna cover this up and then let these rest for another 45 minutes or so. It is time. Beautiful. Look at those. Perfect. All right, so you wanna stick a toothpick in when it comes out mostly clean. I used a butter knife. And then it's ready. I'm gonna let these sit for about 5 minutes before I turn them out to completely cool. Our rolls have doubled, so we're gonna bake at 375. We're gonna get that started. Let's take a look. Aren't those, oh, I can smell the little bit of cinnamon spice, but it smells like a yeast dough more than anything. Aren't they beautiful? So as soon as this preheats, we'll pop them in. The rolls are gonna go in a 375-degree oven for 12 to 15 minutes until they're golden brown. Oh my goodness, look at those. Beautiful. So we're going to just brush these with some butter. Look at how beautiful those are. Oh. So we have some of this softened butter here, and I just got it on the brush. And brush the tops. But I do want to try one. There's nothing. If you're a bread lover, which I am, there's nothing. Look at it steaming. Oh, that smells so good. Oh, those are like Roadhouse rolls. They are light. They're not sweet. I love that. But you know what you could serve with this? Some of that cinnamon honey butter. Oh, It's cooked all the way through. It's not doughy, but it is incredibly soft. Look at that. Little butter inside the roll. Cheers, friends. 10 out of 10. I totally recommend these. You barely get any spice, you barely get any pumpkin, you just get a really nice, fluffy roll. These would be so amazing on your Thanksgiving or Christmas table or any family gatherings or just a regular old Sunday dinner. I totally will be making these again before the holidays. Well, good morning. I wanted to get the pies in the oven, then get showered up and ready for the day and all of those things with going to our daughters for dinner. And we'll be taking the 2 final recipes with us as well. But I want to give the pies time to bake. They bake for a long time and then to cool before we even leave the house. So we're gonna start with the bowl and the filling, and then this is the most amazing pumpkin pie recipe, and it is quite a bit different than what you find on the back of the cans of pumpkin, and so we're going to get going with it. So starting with brown sugar, so that is not something that you find on the cans of pumpkin pie. So I'm gonna do 1.5 times. My reason is the recipe that I'm gonna give you was originally the small pie shells, and now we do deep dish pie shells, and that is what I have. So I either have some leftover from one deep dish pie and I just bake it off to the side, and I do that a lot of times, or if I do 1.5 times, I can fill 2 deep dish pie shells, if that makes sense. But I'm only gonna give you the single recipe as we go along. So 1 cup of brown sugar for the original recipe. And yesterday you saw this brown sugar was firm, and then I told you I put this, now it's completely dried out, this piece of white bread, and it worked perfectly. I've gone ahead and preheated the oven to 450 degrees. That's what we're gonna start the pie out at. So 1.25 cups of white sugar. 1.25. So 3 tablespoons of flour. So 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. teaspoon of allspice. Half a teaspoon of nutmeg. Half a teaspoon of ginger. Quarter of a teaspoon of clove. And then 1 teaspoon of salt. We'll give this a quick whisk and then add the wet ingredients to it. So we're gonna use a combination of canned milk and whipping cream or heavy cream or regular milk. So canned milk, we need 1.5 cups at least. And then half of a cup of cream or something like that. Reaching that 2-cup mark is what you're looking for. So there's that. I just want to whisk this first and make sure that I don't have any lumps in the seasonings or the spices or the flour, the sugar, any of that before I add the rest in, because that would be terrible to get like a bite of clove or something like that. 2 cups of the pumpkin that we did fresh, but you can use canned pumpkin for this recipe as well. There's 1. There's 2. We'll break that up in and then we'll do the eggs last. Now for the eggs, I have a couple of small ones. The recipe calls for 3 eggs. I am going to do 5 total for myself, but a couple of them are smaller, so it should equal about 1.5 times. But you do want to break up the eggs before you add them in. So just give them a really good whisk. Because the other thing that would be horrible is to get like a piece of like egg white cooked in the recipe. All right, nice. There we have it. So this is our filling. I'll get cleaned up and then we'll roll out the pie crust. Our pie crust we made yesterday, chilled overnight, and then I just use these deep dish Pyrex pie pans, and the reason I just stick to those is even the pie fillings that I have frozen previously on this channel will fit directly in those pans, and so I just try and stick to one kind of pie pan. I do, however, have a couple of other ones. I just don't use them very often. So a little flour on the surface and then a little on the top. And then with your rolling pin, just start pushing it down. It's a cold crust, and so it'll start kind of cracking or breaking, but it will come back together. Just making sure that the crust is gonna fit. I don't like a big, thick edge crust on this pie, only because it's cooked at so high and cooked for a long time that it kind of tends to burn the edges. So get that in there using a sharp knife. I just trim my pumpkin pie like this, right at the edge. You can do whatever kind of crust edge you like. There we go. I rolled up what's left of the dough, set that to the side just in case that I need it. But something you can do is if you have some fall or Christmas cookie cutters and you're making this for a holiday, you can kind of bake them off a little bit and then set them on the top before the pie is completely set. But light enough that they don't sink into the dough. I have done that before, but that's a good way to use up any additional dough. So we're gonna just split this between the two shells. As high up as we can get it. It puffs a little bit in the middle. However, the least amount of crust exposed, you won't have shrinkage that way. And what happens is the pie keeps the crust from burning. A perfect amount for 2 deep dish pie shells. Okay, so now I'm gonna try and get these in the oven without spilling them. My crust slid down a little, no problem. I do have a foil lined baking sheet in there so that if we do spill, it's not getting all over the bottom of the oven. These are gonna start out at 450 for 15 minutes, and then we're going to turn it down to 350 until the pie is completely cooked. It says 45 minutes for the original recipe, but it's probably gonna take closer to an hour because the size of the pie pan is larger than how this original recipe was written. So keep that in mind whenever you're taking a really, really old recipe and then using nowadays size containers. If you've had to double it or something like that, you need to increase the cook time. The 450 or 475, you can do either one for 10, 15 minutes. That just kind of helps set the pie, and then we turn it down. So I will bring you back when this pie is finished. All right, we're ready for our day. These should be done. I did the first 45, I gave the extra 15 like we talked about. Yep, so as soon as the center is set and not jiggly anymore, or you can tell that it's not raw, the pie is actually done. Perfect. All right, now we're gonna move on and get the dinner dishes ready. We are getting started on the savory pumpkin dishes, and we are doing a Jada's pumpkin and bacon lasagna rolls. I have some salted boiling water, the little oil because we don't want the sheets of lasagna to stick together, and I need at least 12, so that's 3, 4, 5. I'll do a couple extra just in case we have a little more filling than we expect. And then those will go in. So I'm gonna cook this according to package directions in the boiling salted water for about 9 minutes or so. And then I'm gonna cool the lasagna sheets before we roll them. In the meantime, we're gonna get going on the cream sauce. We're gonna get melting 2 tablespoons of butter. So I already have some soft butter out. And we are going to make a roux. A roux consists of a fat, which is the butter, and flour. And we want to cook the flour taste out as best we can. So adding 3 tablespoons of flour to 2 tablespoons of butter. What I liked about this recipe is it can be made the day before, ahead of time, and then taken along with you, and then you just heat it, which we're going to pre-make it, and then when we get to my daughter's, we will just heat it up under the broiler, and it won't be a big deal. So the flour and butter come together. We're gonna do 4 cups of whole milk. Room temperature keeps it from getting lumps in it. Get that whisked in really quick. And as this is going, to add a little flavor, I have 2 cloves of garlic that I've just kind of sliced up. She said not to have it overpowering the garlic flavor in this one. So put the garlic in there, let that start to cook down, and we are gonna add a little bit of salt. I'm gonna come back and whisk this every few minutes or so, but in the meantime, we can put together the filling. For the filling, I pre-cooked some 12 ounces of bacon. So some crispy bacon, and just a little bit of the bacon grease is gonna give it some nice flavor. So get that in first, as well as 1.5 cups of ricotta. Two cups of mozzarella. I just grated this a second ago, so it's nice and soft, fresh mozzarella. And then a little bit of crushed red pepper flake. We like it spicy. If you don't, maybe do a little white or black pepper. Give this a mix. And to this, we are going to, I have some Parmigiano Reggiano cheese here. About half of a cup goes in. Let's just grate that fresh. Okay. And the last thing that she adds to her cheese filling is the zest of an orange. She says it gives a bright note, a nice flavor that goes with the heaviness of the cream sauces, the bacon, all of that. You can smell it. It smells delicious. I've never done orange with bacon, so I'm excited to see how this turns out. Okay, it's been a while since we started the cream sauce here, and what I used this spatula so that I knew that it was ready. But what you're looking for is when you can run your finger down it and it stays separate. Little taste test. Real mild garlic flavor in there. Oh, it tastes wonderful. Okay, so the next things we're gonna season up this with is a little bit of fresh nutmeg, just a tiny bit. Goes a long way because it's a super rich, bright, deep flavor, as well as half of a cup of Parmesan, and then an additional little pinch of salt. It's not very salty at all, I just tasted it. There we go. Give it a good whisk. We're gonna set aside 1.5 cups of the cream sauce, and it will go on the top. And the remainder of it, we are going to add, so I'll just do it in this pan. We are gonna add 1.5 cups of the pumpkin puree. So here's the pumpkin part of the recipe. So essentially we're making like a striped orange and white deal. Perfect. Oh, that's such a pretty color. Look at that. Look at that. I have a very old baking dish from the 90s. This paper chuffed baking dish is from. And so I am just gonna scoop a little bit of this in the bottom so that the pasta doesn't stick. And then we just need enough for the topping to do a couple of stripes. Perfect. All right. A nice thick coating of that in the bottom. And then what we're gonna do is taking the sheets. So I just laid the pasta sheets out on a cookie sheet while let it cool. So I'm gonna do a good scoop of the filling. And I did taste a little bit of it to see if I thought it needed salt or pepper or anything. It doesn't. It's wonderful. So we spread that out all the way down the lasagna sheet. Oh, perfect. Okay. And then roll it up and seam side down into the pumpkin sauce. Oh, so cute. All right, let's keep going. We ended up with a perfect amount of filling. They are so cute. So cute. There is a good amount of filling in each one, and so do not be shy. If you try this recipe, not be shy in it, but I cannot imagine how good it's gonna be, honestly, because each element has just tasted absolutely amazing. So, a couple of extras. There we have it. And then we're going to spoon over in stripes pumpkin, okay, the cream, all right, the remainder of the white sauce, all right, we're gonna cover this with some saran wrap and bake it off when we get there. The last recipe of the day is going to be a pumpkin and goat cheese risotto, and I think what's going to make it an absolute showstopper is instead of just baking it off in a baking dish, we're gonna bake it off in an actual pumpkin and take the whole pumpkin with us as part of the meal. So the first thing we wanna do, it says, is to add 1 cup of pumpkin. I did end up having to open a can of pumpkin because we barely had a half of a cup left. So that with 1 cup of the vegetable broth, we have 4 cups total of vegetable broth. And it wants us to just whisk this together, set it aside before we begin the cooking process of the rice. We have our oven preheating at 375 degrees. We have a heavy, this is an enameled cast iron pan. We want about a tablespoon or so of oil in the bottom. We're gonna get that preheating as well. And once it gets going, what I've pre-chopped over here is a shallot. So it says half a cup of shallot. And then we're also gonna need 2 cloves of garlic. So I have the risotto is made with arborio rice, is my understanding. And it is these short, fat grains of rice that we just keep in stock and on hand here on the homestead. And I have gone ahead and rinsed mine in preparations of all of this. And so that I wanted to show you what the rice actually looks like. All right, the first thing that's gonna go in is the shallots, now that we've preheated the oil. You want them to be really, really fine because the rice itself is super fine, and we don't want to get like a big chunk of shallot or onion, something like that, and then the tiny bite of rice. We want this to kind of marry into the size of the rice. Move those around. These are gonna go for about a minute. We're starting to get a little bit of browning and the shallots are starting to turn translucent. So to this, we're gonna do 2 cloves of garlic. A little salt and pepper. All right, as that kind of cooks down a little, we're gonna use a dry white wine And we need a half of a cup to pull the brown bits. Flavor. Bond is what that's called. All right, simply after that, just pulls everything out of the bottom because the alcohol is gonna continue to cook out. We're gonna go in with the pumpkin puree, as well as the other 3 cups of liquid. And we want to bring this to a boil before we add in the rice. I'm gonna get a couple of fresh herbs just kind of chopped up. I need about a teaspoon of fresh rosemary and then about 1.5 teaspoons of fresh sage. So I'm just gonna give that a nice chop. And then we're gonna go into the broth with the fresh herbs, as well as a little fresh grated nutmeg, a pinch of red pepper flakes, now we're heated to the simmer, so this is boiling, and I did go ahead and take a little taste test because I want to make sure there's enough salt and things to it. Now this is rinsed rice, so I washed this rice, it's just been in the strainer. That's a 1.5 cups of arborio rice. Now we're gonna ad-lib the directions a little bit so that I can get in the pumpkin. As soon as this comes back to a boil, I'm gonna cover it and I'm gonna let it steep on low for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll bake it off in the oven. Let's see, already starting to come up to the simmer. So what I looked for with this pumpkin is to not have to cut anything off of the bottom because we don't want it leaking out. And I needed it to sit flat like this. Sorry, the lighting. The sun this time of year just comes straight in through these windows, and it's a very fantastic because we have very short days, but it kind of messes with the lighting a little. So I'm going to just cut the top off. I have a really sharp serrated knife. Not beautiful, I'm not great at that. So take the knife, kind of clear the edges so we can put it in. And then everything we scoop out is gonna go to the chickens. You might have to use a knife or an ice cream scoop. If you just scrape it up the sides, it kind of pulls a lot of it out. And so the pumpkin will cook while the rice does, and it'll become soft. I love when I see people make like big hearty soups and meals in the pumpkin. I just think what a fun way to serve a pumpkin dinner than in a pumpkin. So I got that really nice and cleaned out. I'm gonna wipe it down and then we will fill it with the rice. I did go ahead and put the pumpkin in this baking dish, only in case there's any kind of mishap. And then we are gonna ladle it in, and it's gonna cook for about 60 minutes in the oven. And so we do not want all of it absorbed. So, ladle. Perfectly. Okay, we should have scraped a little more out of the inside, but that's fine. We're gonna go in the oven, messy as we may be. And that's why it's in a baking dish. And then I'm gonna clean up the kitchen. Oh my goodness, it's coming so pretty. It's boiling out the top. So, let's see if the rice is cooked. 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 Let's see if the think it is. It tells me to stir it and add some goat cheese. So I might put a little bit of it to the side and then see if we can pile it back in. Okay, so it's hot and I don't want to burn myself. So I am gonna take some of this to the side just so I can stir like it says, and that is fully cooked. Oh, perfect. So it says to stir it. And then I'm gonna add 4 ounces of goat cheese. Oh, that's beautiful. It's kind of melting throughout. Okay, so I am gonna taste it, I think, for salt and pepper before I mix it all back together. It doesn't need anything. You're right. Okay, that is so beautiful. It's fully cooked. Perfect. I love the strength of goat cheese. If that's not something you love, I totally think you could make this with with different cheese. Just even Parmesan, something that's like a little bit milder. But we're gonna top it in just a minute. But I have a really pretty baking dish that I want to put this in to take with us. All right, so the pumpkin is so soft, cooked down. I maybe should have cooked it in the serving. Let's see if I can. Oh, it's hot. Okay, there we go. You don't want to put fingerprints in it. Oh, beautiful. Now, to top this, when we get there, so I think we'll just mix it together in a little bowl and take it in a baggie. It wants us to do some dried cranberries. So I have some of these, craisins, and then a little more goat cheese that I have, as well as some pumpkin seeds. We'll top that. That'll be beautiful. There we have it. We are, put the lid back on. I'm gonna wrap it in foil, fluff it up when we get there, and then that should be, I'm excited. So I'm also gonna fry up some sage leaves to go on top of the lasagna rolls when we get there. So that is covered and ready. We have our cranberries and pumpkin seeds. All right, look at our pies. Aren't those beautiful? So I have to cover those as well. Cody has some whipped cream for them. We have our 2 pumpkin loaves ready to go, as well as the dinner rolls that we made last night. They are nice and soft. I just put them in the bowl, covered it with some plastic wrap. And Erin and I are ready to go to our daughter's and have the most luxurious pumpkin themed dinner. I am very excited. All right, has a little, just scoop from this side.
Jessica.
There's 6 rolls.
Jessica.
Oh, look at that. So the pumpkin risotto turned out beautiful. And then the pumpkin rolls. And then Cody made bread, spaghetti, patty. All right, we are gonna go eat here with the beautiful Cody. The food turned out fantastic. The boys are already at the table. We thank you so much for being with us today. We hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, would you do us a huge favor and hit the subscribe button? If you ring the bell, you'll get notification, thumbs up, and comments, as well as sharing the videos all help our channel to grow. With that, we always wish you many, many blessings. So we hope that you are blessed We hope that you find something to be grateful for, and we hope to see you in the next video. If you try any of these recipes, let us know. As always, they will be in the description box. We hope to see you soon. Bye, guys.